Hello everyone, my name is Nav Grewal and I am with WBI Home Warranty. In collaboration with Channel Punjabi, we are releasing a new show called Construct It, which will focus on day-to-day construction activities from local projects in the Lower Mainland area. Now we are on site where foundation work is underway at the 147th Street project in Surrey. We also have an empty lot next door where the excavation from next door was piled onto the empty lot. Today we have with us Nick Chassar from WBI Home Warranty, Vice President of Technical Services and Claim Solutions. Hi Nick, we welcome you here today.
Hey Nav, good to see you.
So Nick, we have you here today and we did want to discuss the excavation process, drainage issues, drain tile work, and in detail foundation work from concrete, dam proofing, and everything involved up until the backfill process. So Nick, what we'd like to do is, you have an extensive background in construction. We'd like to ask you to kind of walk us through the stages of where would we start from when we have the empty lot all the way going into the foundation work. What are your recommendations and what kind of insight can you give us and what to look for?
Sure, my pleasure, Nav. So at this stage of the game, we're just dealing with an empty lot here behind me. The soil that you see has just been stockpiled from another excavation that's underway, so that's not really part of this picture. But you can picture the flat lot that's here. At this stage, you're going to have to decide where you're going to situate your house, how is it going to fit on your lot lines, and go from there. Obviously, your architect's going to be involved in that. You'll be involved with the local city officials when you apply for your permit. But the next stage, of course, is if we look over to there a little later, we'll see there's an excavator poised and ready to work on this lot that's going to excavate for us. And at that stage, that's when the real work and the real investigation begins, and we have to really pay attention to all the details. Geotechnical is the fancy term for soil, and that's the aspect of the job we're going to cover first. We're going to excavate it and take a look at the soil and make sure that all of the parameters that are necessary are in place to have a sound, safe, secure building site. It's going to carry our house well, and we won't have any drainage or water issues.
So I would say choosing a well-qualified excavator would be very, very important. Most people do focus on, we just need an excavator, and everyone is trying to get, sometimes the cheapest price out there, but I don't think that should be the case because this would be a very important part of the building process for any home or multifamily project. Any comments in regards to that, Nick?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, excellent point. The excavator operator, especially the operator, is worth his weight in gold. If he has the experience and the knowledge that you hope for, he's really going to help guide you through the process. Simply to come in and dig a hole for your foundation isn't enough. You need to have some experienced eyes looking at this, telling you if you've gone deep enough, if the soils are sufficient, do you have a water problem, and so on. And perhaps at some stage, if you run into some concerning issues, do we need to bring in a soil expert, a geotechnical engineer? So yes, your excavator operator and the contractor that's doing that is a very, very valuable resource, and you want to have someone who's well qualified.
And, most people, again, hire the excavator. Should they be relying on the excavator to check the soil conditions, or is this something the builder or homeowner should be involved in and concerned about and actually asking what is the excavator doing in regards to these items?
Well, again, good question. And the more knowledge a supervisor has of such matters, the better off you're going to be. The reality is that we're still going to defer to a local city inspector who's going to inspect this site when it's excavated at some point, and he will either accept what he sees or reject it, and he'll give reasons that I'll go over a little bit later that he might find to reject or accept the work. But the important thing is that you need to have as much knowledge going in by your supervising staff that's going to reflect the quality of the build you're after right from the foundation.
So before we actually go and take a look at the foundation work which is underway, just taking a look behind us, is there anything here on this lot or anything we should be concerned with prior to the excavator starting to dig? Again, reminding you, just make sure, pretend it is an empty lot and the pile of dirt isn't there. Is there anything that we should be involved in at that point, or do we allow the excavator to excavate and then take more concern with once the lot has been excavated?
Again, great questions. The really important thing at that stage is to be sure about how deep you're going to excavate, how closely you're going to excavate to adjacent lot lines, the adjacent building over here, the sidewalk, which is right here beneath my feet. and any other roadways that are encroaching upon the lot. If we excavate sufficiently to put in a foundation, we're probably going to have to excavate right up to this sidewalk, as they've done in the adjacent lot. Well, we're going to have to be sure that the soil is strong enough to support the sidewalk with all this soil removed. Likewise, the house in the lot next door, if we're going to be getting close to their foundation, are we going to be doing any harm? Are we going to be creating any risk to that building? So these are all things that need to be considered carefully, either by a very experienced person, or sometimes if it's necessary, you have to hire a qualified professional engineer. In this case, it would be a geotechnical engineer, possibly in consultation even with a structural engineer, but usually a geotechnical engineer is sufficient.
Another question. I've heard on occasions that the excavator ended up digging the lot 1 foot too deep. How would that happen, and how can that happen if they know to what depth they should be digging? They end up digging extra. Any comments or concerns with that?
Well, with something of that nature, usually it's a case of the excavator operator has been left alone to conduct the work, and he hasn't had the support staff he needs to take elevation measurements. You might have seen people with grade sticks and either a sight level or a laser level that they use to determine the elevation at which they've dug to. You can't expect the operator to do that by himself, so he'll need assistance. So that would be in the form of maybe a manager who's representing the builder, or at least a laboring staff who can operate that equipment for him, take the readings, but in advance the plan has to be made as to how deep we're planning to go relative to the street, the road, the curbs, and those things that matter very much to us as to how the house is going to sit when it's finished relative to the road.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Next, why don't we take a look at the work which is underway? We will go take a look at a foundation which has been excavated, and we'll discuss some soil conditions with Nick and what to look for. So now we're inside the foundation where dam proofing work is complete, drain tile work is substantially complete, and the window wells are being installed. We have Nick with us here who's going to walk through with some of the items from soil conditions, the excavation process, and pretty much how the drainage system functions. So Nick?
Well, if you look down, you can see we're standing on top of a bunch of drain rock. Underneath that is the pipe for the drainage. We've got the dam proofing, but what we're going to look at first, we're going to walk around the back. We're going to go to a spot where we can see the excavated sides of the pit, and we're going to talk a little bit about the soil first and how we would examine that, and whether or not we would decide to hire an engineer to guide us through that process. So let's take a look.
So Nick, now we're inside the excavated foundation. What should we be looking for? What should our concerns be? And what tips and pointers do you have for us?
Sure. Great, Nav. So as you can see, we've got a pretty deep excavation here, and just quick cursory review, we're on great soil, great bearing. How do we know that? Well, I've got approaching 5 years of experience, so not being an engineer may not be the end of the world in my case, because I've done a lot of these. So we've got this red earth and black earth above. That's indicative of organic soil. You can see roots sticking out. Number one rule is you don't want to see any of that kind of material down here at all. The next thing you want to look for is you want to see what kind of material is it that we're sitting on, and how well consolidated, how well packed is it. So usually we would take a piece of rebar, and when we excavated, we would both poke at the sides and we would poke at the base of the excavation to try and determine how tight the soils are. And we do that in lots of different spots to make sure we're satisfied that it's tight. And if I were to do that here, like you can see, there's no crumbling. We've got a really, really well consolidated mix. What appears to be basically there's clay mixed in with cobbles and light gravels. We do have 2 layers of this here, and initially it might be a concern. What that could tell me, because I've got a dividing line right here, is perhaps this layer here might have been added. It might be fill. Although it's hard, it might have been something that was placed here and is not native to this area and may not be as strong as we need it to be. In this case, having looked at this, I'm pretty confident this is pretty solid soil. But going deeper down here, this is really hard soil. This is what we would call glacial till. This was laid down 20 or 30,000 years ago or longer, when the last glaciers were here. They brought the gravel in, they compacted it, 1,000,000-pound glacier. You can imagine how hard this is. This stuff here This is almost like concrete, and that's what we're sitting on here with our foundations. So that's excellent. What if it's not good? What if we're not sure? Well, the first step would be to get prepared, and before we put in any kind of cribbing or foundation formwork or false work, we're going to call our local building official and ask him or her what they think, because they're very experienced and knowledgeable. If they have any concerns, then they might just ask us, you know what, you'll need to hire a geotechnical engineer to do an assessment. In this case, it doesn't look like we need to do that. I'm pretty sure the builder didn't do that here. The other thing we're going to look for is water. Is there water in our excavation? Is there water seeping out of the sides of this? And if so, how much, at what rate, what time of year is it? For instance, if we have a little bit of water seeping in here this time of year, right now we're into November, I'm not overly concerned. There's lots of groundwater buildup from the rains that we've had recently, and that can perk back out, seep back out. That's pretty natural. But if it's July and we have water seeping out here, then that's a red flag. We could have some perched water, or we could even have an underground spring that's going to continue to leach water into here. And we need to figure out if we need to do anything further with that. And again, that's where calling out a professional might be the way to go. But always defer to your local authority, your local building inspector, because they're actually a great resource, and they ultimately want your building to work. They don't want it to fail. So that's the place I would start. Obviously, hopefully you've hired a builder who's got the knowledge and the expertise as well. But if you have any questions, go to your local building official.
So whose responsibility should this actually be, Nick? Taking a look at all these soil conditions. As a builder, the builder hires the excavator. So should they also be concerned in following up with these items, or is the excavator already taking a look at these items on their own, and the builder can just sit back and relax, kind of thing?
Well, you're going to count on everybody that's involved. You're going to ask for their expertise. But if you're relying solely on one individual or another, you're making a mistake, especially with something as critical as this. You're going to ask questions, you're going to do assessments all on your own, and anything at all that's even remotely questionable, you need to escalate that. Go to your local building official, and from there, they're probably going to guide you further and tell you whether or not you're going to need an engineer. If you're not convinced and you're not completely comfortable with what even the local officials told you, because they're fallible, you know what? A consulting engineer, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's very cheap insurance to spend that now to make sure that your soil conditions, the drainage conditions, everything is ripe to make your house happy, healthy, and well built for a long period of time.
Perfect. So all this looks good, as you're saying. Anything else of concern as we move along?
There would be one thing that would be of concern here that I would want to take a close look at, and that's over at the front of the building where we've excavated right up adjacent to the sidewalk. There could be some geotechnical concerns of soil failure, of it collapsing, because of how they had to excavate to allow for room to build a foundation. And we could go over there, take a quick look at that, and discuss how we might approach that if we had concerns.
Perfect. Let's head over to the other side and take a look and see what kind of insights Nick can give us over there.
So now this is an example of what we were talking about earlier when we were up on the other lot. What kind of structural concerns do we have when we excavate for the foundation? Adjacent houses, adjacent roadways, which is right here. So we've had to excavate this to allow room for crews to work. So we're going to go up top, take another look, and talk about possible concerns with what's been done here and what, if anything, needs to be done to mitigate against failure.
Okay, perfect. We'll follow you up and let's see what insight you can give us.
So here we are up top looking at the same concern. There's the roadway, there's the sidewalk, our excavation is right up to it. So an obvious concern is this structurally sound and strong enough to support this without it collapsing and failing? So this again is something that you're going to have to count on professionals, whether people that are highly experienced or actually have a degree in such matters, to actually guide you through this process. Here, because of the nature of the soil that we've already revealed, very, very hard glacial till, and that very well consolidated clay layer with the cobbles in it, there's no concerns based on what I know with my past experience. However, a city official might come by and take a look and say, you know what, I don't like what I see here. And they're going to say, I want you to get a geotechnical consultant to come in and provide assurance that this is strong enough. And if it's not, you might be required to erect temporary forms to support the soil, or perhaps even bolt into underneath the road. That's a pretty rare circumstance in this setting, but it's not unheard of. And we definitely use something you'll see when we're building high rises and big skyscrapers. We're excavating right up to the road very deep, and we're bolting into the soil and putting up temporary shoring. Either which way, we want to make sure our site is safe, and what's more is we're not going to get in trouble. Well, the truth of the matter is, when you're building a house, if you hire somebody to build a project for you, the law states clearly that the owner is responsible to meet the needs of the building code. And the same thing exists with work safe rules. Although the various contractors could be held responsible for mistakes, errors, or violations, you as the owner are also responsible. So you want to be sure that the people that you're working with are being diligent, responsible, and they're well trained.
Excellent, Nick. Thank you for that. So, Nick, what would be the next step here? What other items should we look for as we move into, drainage systems and water management in the foundation?
So if we look down below, we can see that they're just about done here with installing all their drainage. They've got perimeter drainage. They've got rainwater leaders installed. They've also got what we call upstands for what are going to be window wells. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute when we go down there. But looking from above, you can see the concrete basin, what a lot of people call the sump. And you've got pipes coming in and pipes going out. Fundamentally, what it all is all the drainage water is being pulled into that location. It's allowed to settle, so any material, any solids that are carried in that drain pipe are deposited in that tank, and then the water just seeps out and overflows out through that pipe on the far side here in order to keep the city's drainage system clear of debris. That's something that a homeowner is rarely aware of, that they need to actually service, that sump will extend all the way up to the surface once it's complete, and there'll be a lid on it that needs to be removed at least every 2 years, and it should actually be inspected, and sometimes, if necessary, a vacuum truck brought in to remove the debris that's building up in the bottom of it. Looking further, we can see the network of piping coming through, and ultimately what we have is 3 drainage systems for runoff, all coming to one location. There are other pipes there that we can see, where we can look and see that there's a hole cut in the foundation or through the footing, and there's this black pipe that seems to be coming out of the house and a white pipe that's coming out from underneath the house. Those two things will be providing a domestic water supply, and the white pipe will be the sewage coming out of the house, and that too is going to be connected to the city system.
Excellent. And again, you did say, every few years or every 2 years, there should be maintenance and an inspection. I honestly don't think many homeowners are either aware or are probably inspecting that. Should someone be guiding them? Should the municipality be guiding them? Any insight into that? Who should they contact to have that inspected and serviced? Because I probably believe they wouldn't be capable of doing it themselves.
Well, I'm going to use 2 words in Latin, caveat emptor, buyer beware. That's one of those things that when you buy a car, you buy a stereo, you buy a house, responsibilities that fall to you as the owner. It's important to ask the questions of your builder. What maintenance am I responsible for? And hopefully they can provide you with a baseline of information that will guide you through that. Things like this, most people I recommend hire a maintenance company that will come through and do that for you. They'll both do it safely, properly, and in a fashion that's not going to potentially do damage to your system.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So we're taking a look at the drain tile system now, and what kind of insight can you give us, Nick, here?
Well, if we look down below here, we've exposed the drain tile that's been installed. That's a 4-inch PVC perforated pipe. It'll have holes in the side of it that allow it to collect water. And then over top of that, we've got our drain rock. The building code, of course, requires a minimum of 6 inches of cover, 150 millimeters of drain rock. Remember, that's minimum. That's minimum. The more rock we add, the better this system is going to work. How much rock do we actually need? Well, that really depends on the excavation. Depends on things we talked about previously, about soil seepage, groundwater seepage, perched water, underground springs. The more of that we see, the more drainage we need to provide to the building. We have a very, very dry site here, so they're installing this just to building code standard, which should be more than sufficient. They're going to have 6 inches of cover of rock all the way around it, and this continuous pipe going all the way around the perimeter of the foundation. So here we are at the edge of the footing, and adjacent to that is a wall sitting on it. If we go to the back later, we'll see where we've exposed the pipe. It still continues to run continuously all the way around the building. Okay, so here we are. We've moved along the other side of the foundation, and looking here, we can see the drain rock following all the way along, and that pipe is continuing. We've exposed some more pipe over there in that little nook. And then if you continue on down where we're standing, you can see Behind us, there are these white pipes sticking up. We've got these upstands that are here at what we call window wells, locations that are going to house a window, and this is going to be basically have retained earth around it. There will be these 4x4s that are being erected here right now, a system of retaining to hold the soil back below grade, and this here is going to be drainage for each of those window wells or pits they're going to form. Down the far end where the worker's doing his thing, you see the very, very tall white pipe. That's what we call a rainwater leader. That's also tied into this system, and it is going to carry water away from the roof. We'll go over there in a minute and talk about it. And so rainwater leaders are going to also be installed here that will look a lot like these inspection chamber pipes, but they're going to be installed independent of the drainage system, and there'll be a separate set of pipes going around the perimeter of the building, higher than the perimeter drainage. They'll be there to catch the rainwater off the roof, directed into a separate system with no holes or perforations. Instead, that just runs directly to that sump that we talked about at the beginning that's at the front of the building.
So Nick, we have two more pipes which are exposed here. Can you tell me what these are for?
Yeah, so now what we actually have here, if the cameraman can pan over here, we've got a conduit here for the electrical service that's running underground, and this is for Cablevision, telephone, internet. Something that people might see and wonder what the heck is that and why is nothing connected to that yet. So at a later date, after this place is backfilled, this is going to be marked and staked, but more than likely the builder is going to come back here later and install this work once we have some walls erected, because there's some requirements for installing a meter base and a panel base and so forth in order to install this conduit, which will extend into the house. But it's just an interesting thing to point out right now. The strings that are here, these are what we call pull strings. They've already been inserted into the pipes so that when they're ready to put wire through here, they can tie the other end of this over at the electrical box by the road to that wire and pull on it and pull that wire through.
Excellent, thank you. So Nick, here I guess it's almost ready for backfill by the looks of things. Any comments at this point in time?
Not too much now, other than we can actually point out a finished damp-proofing system with drain mat applied over top of it. We're planning on going to another project to take a look at how it's applied. It's going on step by step right now, but this is what the finished product looks like. And the drainage mat that you see here, this has been applied over top of what you look at over there. There's a damp-proofing that's been applied to the concrete. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail.
So Nick, here I guess we're standing at a foundation which is substantially complete, almost ready for backfill. Any insight, comments, or concerns at this point in time?
Well, it just gives us the opportunity to see how the damp proofing should look when it's all done and the dimple mat is applied. So if I ask the cameraman just to pan over here, you can see the dimple mat, and that's forming that capillary break I've talked about before that keeps an airspace between this first membrane, and then there's a second membrane, which if the cameraman can point over there, we can see the damp proofing that's been applied. So that drainage mat or dimple mat is applied up against that, as we've talked about before, and it allows a free flow of water against it, so there's no water pressure trying to force its way in.
And from my knowledge, as per the BC Building Code, is it true that a minimum requirements is the 2 coats of the asphalt emulsion damp proofing, or has that standard changed recently?
Yep, that standard still applies. The minimum requirement would be to parge all of your tie holes, all of your cracks, your joints with a mastic that's approved, and then 2 coats of an approved bituminous emulsion is the minimum requirement. What we're looking at here today, of course, is a much better application, a much better system, because now we are reducing the risk of water buildup against the foundation and forcing its way through the pores in the concrete. Because we have to remember, damp proofing is not waterproofing. It reduces the amount of moisture that can transmit, that can flow through. It doesn't stop it altogether.